Hello, my friends. It is officially 4 o'clock, and we are back together again. Welcome. If this is your first time watching, hi. I am Amanda, aka AGB, or as some of my library friends call me, the notorious AGB. I will take that comparison any day of the week. And welcome to AGB Reads, and specifically AGB Reads History. We have come together this week all for the Week of Remembrance in Action, all around the Japanese American internment, and to mark the anniversary of the passage of Executive Order 9066, and to trade a librarian. I like to say that I am a librarian, a teen librarian trapped in an academic librarian's body, and I'm very passionate about education. So during this period of social distancing, we come together a lot of afternoons and read. So this week's theme is, as I said, all about the Week of Remembrance in Action, and today's selection is a classic. It is Farewell to Manzanar. So let's get a little bit of background on Farewell to Manzanar. I'm pulling a lot of this information from the title and the description of home right now. Today's book, as I said, is Farewell to Manzanar by Jean Wakatsuki Houston and her husband James D. Houston. They actually met while they were journalism students at, want to make sure I've got it right, I really want to say San Jose State. So the previous iteration of San Jose State College, and they were married in Hawaii. This book came about because one of Jean's nephews that was actually born at Manzanar came to interview her in, I believe she says 1971. Her nephew was doing a project all about the internment, and his parents would not talk about it. And even Jean gave very caged answers. She didn't want to go into a lot of detail because there's a lot of trauma that surrounds individuals that were at these camps, especially folks that have very distinct memories of these camps. There's a term used called intergenerational trauma or generational trauma, and it is incredibly evident in the Japanese American community. And in fact, I am so lucky that I have family that support my research habits. And my wonderful Aunt Raylene out in Washington, hi Aunt Raylene, hi Uncle Ed if you're watching this, they sent me a link to a Lenten series all on generational trauma, and it's actually presented by members of the Japanese American community at a church in Colorado. So with the, there are a lot of things about the pandemic that are terrible. My therapist always encourages me to find something to basically offset that negativity. And one thing is that now, online platforms have become a huge thing. Hello, we're getting to talk together right now because of one. So I'm going to get to actually participate and watch this, and I'm excited in that way that historians get when we have a topic that we know desperately needs to be talked about and needs to be learned about, and it kind of makes you feel squicky. And at the same time, we know it needs to be talked about. So I'm super excited to do that. So yeah, in fact, let me show you. You can kind of see it on the iPad. And of course, it's blown out a little bit. Each page on the Densho resource guide actually has the type of media it is, an interest level, a reading level, the specific genre, the chronology of the text itself, the geographic location, point of view, themes, and the availability. So one thing that Densho has done that's hosted by the Internet Archive, that these are going to be important texts. So there are, I think, 4 different versions of Farewell to Manzanar in there. There is actually a copy of what we are going to be reading on, I believe, Thursday. I want to say Thursday. Y'all would think with me having made the list, I would remember. Aha! Thursday. I was right. So the book that we're going to be reading Thursday, which I'm really excited about, they call this Enemy by George Takei. It's a graphic novel. They actually have a copy of the graphic novel that's available for checkout. So, ta-da! We've got that together. But this is, like I said, especially for my friends that are doing online education at home right now. and want to do a thematic unit on the Japanese American internment, this website is a gold mine for you. So, link to it is in the description of this video again. Now, I thought long and hard about which of the chapters of Farewell to Manzanar I wanted us to read today. And I could have started with chapter 1, which is actually about Jean's family's move to Terminal Island because her father was actually taken in by the FBI almost immediately after Pearl Harbor. But I decided to go with chapter 2, mainly because of the title of chapter 2. So the title of chapter 2 is Shikata ga Nai, and it's a compound Japanese term that translates to "it cannot be helped." My UNCA folks will recognize that that is the title of my thesis that I wrote, good grief, 8 years ago. It is this sense of what has happened to them cannot be changed, it cannot be helped. It's something that we have to endure. And that's really what's going on in the world right now, too. We can help change what's going on by wearing masks, by washing our hands, by staying apart, by being cognizant of how we gather together, by getting our vaccines when we're able to. At the same time, it cannot be helped that we cannot be together like we're used to, but we can make the best of it. Thus, AGB Reads was born. So, today we are going to be reading together chapter 2 of Farewell to Manzanar. So, I'm in my happy, wonderful papasan chair I've had since college. And now, let's read Farewell to Manzanar. Chapter 2, Shikata ga Nai. In December of 1941, Papa's disappearance didn't bother me nearly so much as the world I soon found myself in. He had been a jack of all trades. When I was born, he was farming near Inglewood, California. Later, when he started fishing, we moved to Ocean Park, near Santa Monica, and until they picked him up, that's where we lived. In a big frame house with a brick fireplace, a block back from the beach. We were the only Japanese family in the neighborhood. Papa liked it that way. He didn't want to be labeled or grouped by anyone. But with him gone and no way of knowing what to expect, my mother moved all of us down to Terminal Island. Woody already lived there, and one of my older sisters had married a Terminal Island boy. Mama's first concern now was to keep the family together, and once the war began, she felt safer there than isolated racially in Ocean Park. It was the first time I lived among other Japanese, or gone to school with them, and I was terrified all the time. This was partly Papa's fault. One of his threats to keep us younger kids in line was, "I'm going to sell you to the Chinaman." When I had entered kindergarten 2 years earlier, I was the only Asian in the class. They sat me next to a Caucasian girl who happened to have very slanted eyes. I looked at her and began to scream, certain Papa had sold me out at last. My fear of her ran so deep I could not speak of it, even to Mama. Couldn't explain why I was screaming. For 2 weeks I had nightmares about this girl, until the teachers finally moved me to the other side of the room. And it was still with me. This fear of Asian face, day or night. Let's see here. Oh, I skipped a line. Look at me. In those days, it was a company town, a ghetto owned and controlled by the canneries. The men went after fish, and whenever the boats came back, day or night, the women would be called to process the catch while it was still fresh. 1 in the afternoon or 4 in the morning, it made no difference. My mother had to go to work right after we moved there. I can still hear the whistle. 2 toots for French's, 3 for Van Camp's. Nothing more than a shack. A barracks with the single plank walls and rough wooden floors, like the cheapest kind of migrant workers' housing. The people around us were hardworking, boisterous, a little proud of their nickname, Yogore, which meant literally uncouth one or roughneck, or dead-end kid. They only spoke Japanese exclusively. They spoke a dialect peculiar to Kyushu, where their families had come from in Japan, a rough fisherman's language, full of oaths and insults. Instead of saying bakatare, a common insult meaning stupid, terminal islanders would say bakariaro, a coarser and exclusively masculine use of the word, which implies gross stupidity. They would swagger and pick on outsiders and persecute anyone who did in the second grade despised me for it. They were tough and mean, like ghetto kids everywhere. Each day after school, I dreaded their ambush. My brother Kyo, 3 years older, would wait for me at the door, where we would decide whether to run straight home together or split up or try a new and unexpected route. None of these kids ever actually attacked. It was the threat that frightened us, their fearful looks, and the noises they would make, like miniature samurai, in a language we couldn't understand. At the time, it seemed we had been living under this reign of fear for years. In fact, we lived there about 2 months. Late in February, the Navy decided to clear Terminal Island completely. Even though most of us were American-born, it was dangerous having that many Asians so close to Long Beach Naval Station, on the opposite end of the island. We had known something like this was coming, but, like Papa's arrest, not much could be done ahead of time. There were 4 of us kids still young enough to be living with Mama, plus Granny, her mother, 65 then, speaking no English and nearly blind. Mama didn't know where else she could get work, and we had nowhere else to move to. On February 25th, the choice was made for us. We were given 48 hours to clear out. The second-hand dealers had been prowling around for weeks, like wolves, often or later. Mama had left all but her most valuable possessions in Ocean Park, simply because she had nowhere to put them. Lacquered tables and one fine old set of china, blue and white porcelain, almost translucent. On the day we were leaving, Woody's car was so crammed with boxes and luggage and kids we had just run out of room. Mama had to sell this china. One of the dealers offered her $15 for it. She said it was a full setting for 12 and worth at least 200. He said 15 was his top price. Mama started to quiver. Her eyes blazed up at him. She had been packing all night and trying to calm down Granny, who didn't understand why we were moving again and what all the rush was about. Mama's nerves were shot, and now Navy jeeps were patrolling the streets. She didn't say another word. She just glared at the man, all the rage and frustration channeled at him through her eyes. He watched her for a moment and said he was sure he couldn't pay more than $17.50 for that china. She reached into the red velvet case, took out a dinner plate, and hurled it at the floor right in front of his feet. The man leaped back, shouting, Hey, don't do that! Those are valuable dishes! The floor. Then another, and another, never moving, never opening her mouth, just quivering and glaring at the retreating dealer, with tears streaming down her cheeks. He finally turned and scuttled out the door, heading for the next house. When he was gone, she stood there smashing cups and bowls and platters until the whole set lay in scattered blue and white fragments across the wooden floor. The American Friends Service helped us find a small house in Boyle Heights, another minority ghetto in downtown Los Angeles, now inhabited briefly by a few hundred Terminal Island refugees. Executive Order 9066 had been signed by President Roosevelt, giving the War Department authority to define military areas in the western states and to exclude them from anyone who might threaten the war effort. There was a lot of talk about internment, or moving inland, or something like that in store for all Japanese Americans. I remember my brothers sitting around the table talking very intently about what we were going to do, how we would keep the family together. They had seen how quickly Papa was removed, and they knew now that he would not be back for quite a while. Just before leaving Terminal Island, Mama had received her first letter from Bismarck, North Dakota. He had been imprisoned at Fort Lincoln, in an all-male camp for enemy aliens. Papa had been the patriarch. He always decided everything in the family. With him gone, My brothers, like counselors in the absence of a chief, worried about what should be done. The ironic thing is, there wasn't much left to decide. These were mainly days of quiet, desperate waiting for what seemed at the time to be inevitable. There is a phrase the Japanese use in such situations, when something difficult must be endured. You would hear the older heads, the issei, telling others very quietly, "Shikata ga nai, it cannot be helped. Shikata ga nai, it must be done." Mama and Woody went to work packing celery for a Japanese produce dealer. Kyo and my sister May and I enrolled in the local school, and what sticks in my memory from those few weeks is the teacher. Not her looks, her remoteness. In Ocean Park, my teacher had been a kind, grandmotherly woman who used to sail with us in Papa's boat from time to time and who wept the day we had to leave. In Boyle Heights, the teacher felt cold and distant. I was confused by all the moving and was having trouble with the classwork, but she would never help me out. She would have nothing to do with me. This was the first time I had felt outright hostility from a Caucasian. Looking back, it is easy enough to explain. Public attitudes toward the Japanese in California were shifting rapidly. In the first few months of the Pacific War, America was on the run. Tolerance turned to distrust and irrational fear. The 100-year-old tradition of anti-Asian sentiment on the West Coast soon resurfaced, more vicious than ever. Its result became clear about a month later when we were told to make our third and final move. The name Manzanar meant nothing to us when we left Boyle Heights. We didn't know where it was or what it was. We went because the government ordered us to. And, in the case of my older brothers and sisters, we went with a certain amount of relief. They had all heard stories of Japanese homes being attacked, of beatings in the streets of California towns. They were as frightened of the Caucasians as Caucasians were of us. Moving, under what appeared to be government protection, after all. For some, it was very early and misty when we got there with our luggage. Mama had brought heavy coats for all of us. She grew up in eastern Washington and knew that anywhere inland in early April would be cold. I was proud of my new coat, and I remember sitting on a duffel bag trying to be friendly with the Greyhound driver. I smiled at him. He didn't smile back. He was befriending no one. Someone tied a numbered tag to my collar and to the duffel bag. Each family was given a number, and that became our official designation until the camps were closed. Someone else passed out box lunches for the trip, and we climbed aboard. I had never been outside Los Angeles County. Never excitement the way any kid would be. People played cards, sleep. The bus felt others had succeeded in keeping most of us together on the same bus, headed for the same camp. I didn't realize until much later what a job that was. All of us included under the same family number, even though names had been changed by marriage. Many families weren't as lucky as ours and suffered months. Reached our destination, the shades were up. It was late afternoon. The first thing I saw was a yellow swirl across a blurred, reddish setting sun. The bus was being first look at something I would soon know very well, a billowing flurry of dust and sand churned up by the wind through Owens Valley. Been dumped from the baggage trucks that drove out ahead, blurred by sand, rows of barracks that seemed to spread for miles across this plain. People were sitting on cartons or milling around. Inside there was an serving of canned apricots. The Caucasian server, about the size of a constant theme that asserted that, and I'm very excited. A scarf for Kiko.